Owning land isn't just about boundaries on a map. For me, it was about legacy, history, and peace. Years ago, after saving, sacrificing, and working through every imaginable setback, I finally purchased my dream property. It wasn't just any lot. It was an entire hill, crowned by tall pines, and rolling down to a private lake that glistened under the sun like polished glass. I built my cabin at the crest of that hill, a modest retreat made of timber and stone, something that looked as though it had grown right out of the earth itself. I never thought I'd need to defend my right to this place. After all, deeds don't lie. Titles don't just vanish. But I learned quickly that what's written on paper means little to certain types of people. People who believe rules bend around their own sense of entitlement. The cabin sat well away from any suburban developments. The nearest subdivision was a good half-mile down the hill, cut into the lower woodlands like a scar. That development was governed by a homeowners association, an HOA that had earned a reputation among locals for strict, petty enforcement. They policed lawns, mailboxes, even the color of curtains in windows. It didn't affect me. My property line was clearly marked, and my hill wasn't under their jurisdiction. At least that's what I thought. The trouble began when the HOA crowned a new president. Her name was never spoken without a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. Neighbors called her Karen in whispers, but her name might as well have been written in stone. She was the kind of person who thrived on control, who walked through the neighborhood as if it were her personal kingdom. People obeyed, not because they respected her, but because fighting her was exhausting. From her perspective, my cabin represented something she couldn't tolerate: independence. I wasn't in her subdivision, but my property overlooked it. From her yard, she could look up and see the outline of my cabin against the skyline. That seemed to bother her more than anything else. In her mind, my existence was an intrusion. First, it was small things. Anonymous letters tucked under my cabin door warning me about proper building standards. Flyers from the HOA left in my driveway, filled with rules about trash cans and mailbox placement, rules that didn't apply to me. I tossed them aside, never thinking much of it. I assumed they'd figure out soon enough that my hill and lake were my own business. But Karen wasn't the type to back down. Her fixation grew. She'd drive up the road that curved around the base of my hill and park near my gate, staring through the bars like a prison guard inspecting a cell. Once, I caught her walking along my fence line, muttering and scribbling notes into a little pad she carried. I waved at her. She turned away, pretending she hadn't been caught. Then came the complaints. I received a letter from the county zoning office, citing concerns raised by the local HOA about unauthorized construction. The official who signed it was apologetic when I called. He admitted they had no jurisdiction over me, but they were obligated to check because the HOA kept filing reports. Each one was baseless. Each one wasted everyone's time. Still, I brushed it off. My cabin stood strong, my deed was ironclad, and the lake sparkled like it always had. But Karen wasn't finished. She escalated from complaints to confrontation. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was written on HOA letterhead, demanding I attend a compliance meeting. The absurdity almost made me laugh. The HOA had no authority over me, yet here they were trying to drag me into their little tribunal. I ignored it. Days later, the real storm hit. Blue and red lights reflected off the pines as squad cars rolled up my gravel driveway. The crunch of tires on stone broke the evening silence. When I stepped outside, I was greeted not by a neighbor, but by 3 police officers. They told me they'd received a call about unauthorized occupancy. Someone had reported that my cabin was being squatted in illegally. I handed over my deed. The officers were professional, even apologetic, but the fact that they had been summoned at all was infuriating. I knew exactly who had made the call. The HOA president, the self-appointed queen of the subdivision, had finally decided to weaponize the police. That night, as I sat by the fire, the glow of the flames flickering against the log walls, I realized something important. This wasn't going to stop on its own. Karen wouldn't quit, not until she had forced her will upon me. She saw my independence as rebellion, my land as something she deserved to rule over. And if she was bold enough to call the cops once, she'd do it again. The hill and the lake were mine, yes, but ownership meant little if I allowed someone else to dictate how I lived on it. Karen had picked her fight. And whether she knew it or not, she had chosen an opponent who wasn't going to bow to her imagined authority. I didn't yet know how far she'd take it, or what lengths she'd go to prove her dominance. But I did know one thing. The battle for my hill had begun. And the next time she crossed the line, I'd be ready. Got it. Here's chapter 2 in the same narration style. I'll also add the kind of closing line you'd expect in a viral HOA/Karen channel, directly asking the audience if it feels like justice or not. Chapter 2. When Karen claimed the hill. The first police visit should have been the end of it. The officers saw the deed, they confirmed my ownership, and they left. But Karen didn't see it as a loss. She saw it as an invitation to escalate. The HOA wasn't just her hobby, it was her weapon, and she intended to use it. Within a week, flyers began circulating through the subdivision. Neighbors forwarded me photos. They were bold claims, printed in big black letters. Unauthorized cabin on the hill. Karen had spun the story to say that my cabin was built illegally on community property, and that I was occupying the lake without permission. The sheer audacity would have been laughable if it hadn't spread so quickly. People in the subdivision had lived under her thumb for so long that many accepted her words at face value. I started noticing cars slowing as they drove past my gate, drivers craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the so-called illegal cabin. Rumors grew like weeds. Some said I was operating a business up there. Others whispered about zoning violations, and a few even claimed I was endangering the lake. The truth was simple. My cabin was legal, my land was private, and the lake was mine. But facts don't spread as fast as gossip. Then came the HOA's boldest move yet. One morning, I woke to find a large wooden sign hammered into the ground at the base of my hill, right near the subdivision's entrance. In thick paint it read, "Community Lake Access. Managed by the HOA." They were claiming my lake. That was when I realized Karen's strategy. If she couldn't control me directly, she'd create the illusion that she already did. By making the lake appear to be community property, she was conditioning her neighbors to accept her narrative. If enough people believed it, she could pressure local authorities to act in her favor. I couldn't let that stand. I called my attorney and had official letters drafted, reminding the HOA that trespassing or misrepresenting property ownership was a violation of the law. The letters were delivered to every board member. For most people, that would have been enough to scare them off. But for Karen, it was fuel. She called another meeting, whipping the HOA into a frenzy. She painted me as the villain, the outsider who thought he was above the rules. She claimed the lake had always been for community use, despite every record proving otherwise. And she vowed to take back what was theirs. Soon after, I caught neighbors walking down to the shore, fishing rods in hand, coolers in tow, waving as if they had every right to be there. When I told them politely that it was private property, they shrugged and said, "The HOA president told us it's ours." Karen had crossed from annoyance into invasion. I documented everything. Photos of the trespassing, copies of the false flyers, even video of Karen pacing along my fence line with her ever-present notepad. My attorney assured me I had a strong case if it went to court. Still, the situation was wearing on me. This cabin was supposed to be a sanctuary, a retreat from the noise of the world. Instead, it had become a battlefield. The final straw came late one Saturday afternoon. A knock thundered at my door. When I opened it, I found 2 uniformed officers once again. Karen had called the police a second time, this time accusing me of blocking public lake access. I didn't argue. I simply handed over the deed again, this time pointing to the survey maps that showed, in black and white, the hill and lake were mine alone. The officers studied the documents, nodded, and shook their heads in disbelief at the situation. They admitted Karen had been calling them almost weekly about me. This time, though, something shifted. Instead of leaving quietly, one officer went down to speak with Karen. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the frustration on her face, the arms waving, the stomp of her foot as she realized the officers weren't buying her story. For the first time, she looked less like a ruler and more like someone desperate to cling to power she never had. That night, as the moon reflected across the lake, I realized the battle wasn't just about land. It was about truth versus illusion. Karen's power depended on convincing others to believe her lies. My power lay in evidence, patience, and persistence. The fight wasn't over. She'd try again, I was sure of it. But the foundation was cracking beneath her feet. And when it collapsed, I planned to be standing tall, deed in hand, hill and lake still mine. Now the question is, was this justice? Or does it feel like Karen is still getting away with too much? Share your thoughts below. Should the HOA face real consequences, or is the situation already turning in my favor? And that's where the story stood. Karen had tried to seize control of the hill and even claimed the lake as community property, but every attempt only exposed her lies. The police had seen the truth, the documents backed me up, and her grip on the neighborhood was beginning to crack. But was it enough? Do you think this feels like justice, or is Karen still getting away with too much power? Should HOAs like this face real accountability?